Hello, hello. My name is David Rodgers, and you're watching the, Resur- the "Resurrecting the Spirit of Black America" program, which is hosted by Kevin Sullivan and myself. Fortunately, Kevin couldn't be here today, but we do have a good program for you today, and we will resume with after today's program. We will resume with uh, additional programs in the future, starting with a discussion on medicine. But today, today's discussion will center on uh, a strategic plan for Black America. And this is something my background is planning and geography. I have a bachelor's degree in geography with a concentration in community and regional planning, and I have a master's in city and regional planning. And we want to approach solving some of the problems in Black, a great deal of the problems in Black America by utilizing tested principles in the field of planning, geography, the various social sciences, including economics. And today we're going to discuss a SWOT analysis. This is something I learned from planning school, and any of you watching that have a planning background, please forgive me for possibly getting the T in the acronym wrong. I believe it's tools. So, but feel free to write in and say, "Hey, Dave, that's wrong." And we want to do a SWOT analysis for Black America, and a SWOT analysis stems from the field of planning, where we look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and tools. And one of the things that's missing from the conversation about the problems that are faced by Black America is the lack of coordination. Imagine someone trying to build a house, have all the tools, have all of the competent people that you need, all of the knowledge, but for whatever the reason, there's a lack of communication and cooperation between the people involved, such that the house can't get built. And this is the situation we're in. We're not without wealth. We're not without resources. We are not without competent people that can get things done. What we lack is coordination. And as part of the strategic plan of Black America, I have some recommendations, and I will be writing a book and first a paper and later a book on a strategic plan for Black America. And one of my main recommendations is that we should utilize the accident of geography to our advantage. What do I mean by that? Well, it just so happens that even after the Great Migration, there's almost a continuous swath of territory in the United States, starting with Maryland in the north and ending in East Texas in the south, where you have counties with significant African American or Black populations, where they wield considerable political power. However, that political power has not been translated into economic power or wealth. And so what we want to do is try to devise ways to utilize our resources and coordinate them accordingly. But you need a framework to do that. And there's been a lot of great books over the years. For example, Powernomics by Dr. Claude Anderson, where he speaks of strategies to advance Black America. There was another book, I believe it was by Tavis Smiley, called The Covenant with Black America. And in that book is a book consisting of various statistics. It's Black America in numbers, which is a very good book, because we often when we say, well, the problem is the lack of education. Well, what do we mean by that? What does that look like in numbers? Because numbers are the only real things. They're more real than just about anything else. Anything that is real has a number behind it. So what I propose is that we build a nation within a nation. Nothing radically radical about it. It's really enhancing your day-to-day activities and enhancing your day-to-day relationships. That is, we need to take control not only politically of the places that we live, but also we need to also take control of these places economically. That is, when a child in, let's say, let's use a county that I'm very familiar with, and it's a very Black county. It's called Northampton County, North Carolina. The county is about, I would have to say, about 70% African American. And while they hold political power in that county, almost every farm and every business is owned by someone else. So there's a strategic handicap there, and this is the case in not only in urban counties but also in rural counties throughout what we call the South, the swath of territory in the United States south of the Mason-Dixon line. Now, many of you Maryland people consider Maryland to be the North. It's actually not. Historically and culturally, it's really a southern state. But this is a good thing because Maryland has strategic advantages. We have easy access to a port. We have considerable power politically in the state that can, if it's better utilized, we can significantly improve the lives of Black people in Maryland. And Maryland could perhaps become the model Black state, for the lack of a better term. And here is a map of the territory I'm talking about. This is what is called by many geographers and the Census Bureau. It's called the Black Belt. Now, historically, this swath of land was known for its very rich Black soil. So it was the term Black Belt preceded the sociological usage of the term. However, coincidentally, this region retained a great deal of the people who used to work the plantations in this region, and a lot of them remain in this region, and so population-wise, it has been labeled as the Black Belt. So it's a very good region to work from. So some might say, well, Dave, I live in Detroit, or I live in Los Angeles. Now I take a radical position on where people live. Uh, Quite frankly, there are some places in this country that we have no business in. And it is my recommendation that there needs to be a mass exodus out of some cities, like Detroit, Chicago, Los Angeles. Why do I say this? Because in those places you do not have the strategic advantage of ethno aggregation, economic aggregation, and you're almost dependent on people in the state legislatures in those states that do not look like you. Whereas in the South, you could have a population percentage-wise no less than 27%. Mississippi, ironically, is one of the best, in my opinion, best places to implement a strategic plan for Black America because of its high concentration of Black population, its relatively small cities. It has access to a port that's outside the state, but it's close to the state, which is New Orleans. And it has a lot of historically Black institutions that could be better utilized in the advancement of the Black people in that state. We see these types of strategic advantages all over the South. Alabama, which is largely slept on, Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia is a very promising state for Black America. You look at the density of Black people nationwide. As you can see, Blacks are concentrated primarily in what is the East Coast, basically the what is often called the South Atlantic region. That's essentially from Maryland down to Florida, and then the Gulf region, which is Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, and East Texas, which the eastern part of Texas almost resembles Louisiana demographically. But as you can see here, Los Angeles is isolated, and politically, you are a minority of minorities in California. The Black population in California is even smaller than the Asian population. And this is a problem politically because you cannot practice political aggregation in a way that's effective on the state level and the local level. You can't just have power at the local level. You have to have it at the state, you can't just have power at the local level. You have to have it at the state level. And this is virtually, in my opinion, impossible in a state like California or Michigan, as I mentioned before, or even Illinois, where, although you have a high concentration of Blacks in Chicago, statewide, you're at a disadvantage because of your low population overall in the state. Now, that's a different story in a state like, let's say, South Carolina, which is another great example of a state where we can wield a greater degree of power and utilize more resources than what we're using in that particular state. And I want to get to the SWOT analysis. Now, what are our strengths as African Americans? Well, first of all, it's our population. We have a relatively young population when you compare our population to the white population. We grow very steady. I think we grow at a rate. We grow about 8% per year. And right now, the 2010 census says the African American population is 42 million people, and it's probably a lot more than that now. and we're projected to grow to about 60 million people by 2050. Now, we still will be smaller than the Latino community, and much smaller than the white population. However, 60 million right now, 42 million or 45 million people is nothing to sneeze at. Why? Because we're bigger than some states, and we're bigger than a lot of states, and we're bigger than some countries. And one country in particular, we're larger. Population-wise, we're larger than Canada. Canada only has about 33.5 million people. California, if you want to compare ourselves to a large state, California has about 39.1 million people. Now, let's compare the GDP. Just use our imagination a little bit, and just say Black America was a country unto its own. If Black America was a country to its own, it would have a GDP, gross domestic product, of $2.2 trillion. California has, by itself, has a GDP of $2.4 trillion, and Canada has a GDP of $1.7 trillion. So why am I saying all of this? I'm saying that you have the population of very successful regions, and you have a comparable GDP of very successful regions. Canada is a great place, is one of the most advanced countries in the world. California, if it was a country unto its own, it would be one of the largest economies in the world. And what does that mean for Black America? It's the same thing. Black America, if it was a country unto its own, and this is not what I'm advocating. I'm not advocating secession, but I am advocating that we operate as a nation in that we provide all of the needs of a nation, that we have that we've developed the human capital of the nation, and we develop institutions and infrastructure just like a nation. And this is good news. This is good news. However, what does it mean if we have $2 trillion, a GDP of $2 trillion, and California has a GDP of $2.4 trillion, and Canada has a GDP of $1.7 trillion? What does that all mean? What it means is it's not that there isn't money being made, it's that the money is literally running through us, for the lack of a better term. It's almost like electricity going through a wire. It goes in the wire, but it doesn't stay in the wire. Not that you would want electricity to stay in a wire, but my point is that a better analogy is a pitcher of water with a hole in it. Water is constantly, it's not that the water isn't coming into the picture, it's that the pitcher is unable to retain the water. And this is essentially what is going on in Black America. And I think that Dr. Claude Anderson, in his book Powernomics, used the exact same, not the exact same analogy, but a similar analogy, that the money is running through us, and we're not capturing those dollars so that they can be recycled over and over again and be used to build wealth. And see, if we build wealth, we can go snatch some food off the plates of other groups. Now you might say, well, that doesn't sound right, David. That's not right. But it's not about right and wrong. It's about survival, and this is the game that everybody's playing, except us. So once we get our dollars straight, we need to start looking at how can we capture a greater share of the mainstream economy. That is, we want to get into a position to buy a Xerox, to buy a IBM, to buy Microsoft. See, this is the way we need to start thinking. Why go reinvent the wheel, build your own computer company when you have computer companies and all sorts of corporations that already have infrastructure ready and waiting to be used? So this is the way we have to start to think, and there are a lot of other groups that are thinking this way. They are purchasing. There are a lot of companies that we swear are American companies, but they're actually Japanese companies. And there are a lot of companies that are Japanese companies that are actually French or Italian companies. So that's very interesting. So those are our strengths. Other strengths include like I said, our regional distribution of our population that is largely concentrated in an almost continuous swath of territory from Maryland to Florida and on west to eastern Texas. So strategically, we and in this region we have institutions that have already been built, historically black institutions that need to be beefed up. Now we can't depend totally on federal dollars to beef up these institutions to work in our favor. So what does that mean? We have to build enough wealth to endow these institutions to crank out the best and the brightest. We need to develop our human capital to a point that the world comes to us. If you ever notice in basketball, in football, and in music, the world comes to us because we became proficient in all of those things. And a lot of people complain about our over-representation in those areas, but they do demonstrate that if we were to concentrate in other areas in the same fashion, we could dominate those areas as well and become successful. I'm about to run out of time, but I want to get through the rest of the SWOT analysis. Now, what are our weaknesses? Our weaknesses is disorganization, a degrading of our human capital in the prison system, in the prison industrial complex. There are other personal relationships, and really a culture that doesn't encourage critical thinking. We have a culture that encourages a lot of feeling, and it is in my opinion that the successful peoples of the world, including our ancestors thousands of years ago, were thinkers. They were not feelers. They didn't feel their way to success. They thought their way to success, and we have to become better thinkers and analyzers of the world around us. And we have to radically change the culture overall. There are a lot of things that we're doing that are counterproductive, and we put a lot. We need to change music, change the arts, and use the arts to inform us about who we are and who we need to be and where we need to go. Opportunities. Like I said, opportunities are that we need to utilize the infrastructure and the strategic position we have in Black America. We're small enough and big enough at the same time. It's not. There are people other groups that are like 5 to 10 million people, and they have higher GDPs than us because they're more productive. And just imagine how powerful we would be if we would utilize if all 42, 45 million people were working on all cylinders. Just imagine how powerful we would be. So there are opportunities in our midst that we need to better utilize. And tools. Tools include institutions like schools, but one of the institutions that a lot of people in the so-called conscious community want to throw away, and that is the black church. But the black church, when it is being led properly, when it is being coordinated properly for social change, it works wonders. The civil rights movement is a classic example of that. Even before the civil rights movement, churches, a lot of churches became historically black colleges. A lot of various institutions started out as churches. So the church, we need to go back to the idea of the church being the Swiss Army knife. Everything that we need to the church need to address a comprehensive set of needs for Black America. Not and we need to do that without neglecting spirituality. There are some churches out here that are all about the money and all about the wealth, and that's fine, but they often neglect spirituality, the basic human needs that we have. So we need to go back to the comprehensive, go back to engaging the Black church in a comprehensive role in the advancement of Black people. Another tool is to develop a Black American ideology that is centered on Black excellence, advancement, and strategic advancement. And I want to emphasize excellence. We got a culture that says have this good enough culture where you don't strive for the best. You know, you got people who are getting awards and ribbons for just participating, and that's I understand the rationale behind it, but it's making the population, for the lack of a better term, sorry in a sense. So what we have to do is develop a culture of excellence that doesn't damage the ego of the individual participating in it. We don't want to go like other groups where where they emphasize excellence to the point where individuals are committing suicide. No, that's unhealthy. I'm talking about the balanced standard of excellence that they had back in the 1920s. When I hear stories about Black people being in the segregated schools, and those Black teachers wouldn't accept anything less than your best. That's what I'm talking about. And they did it in a way that where the child that might be a little slow felt loved and appreciated. And a lot of these people went on to become productive people in society. Maybe they didn't all go to 4-year colleges, but they went on to do good things. So we need to go back to that. And so that's the SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and tools. And they often overlap. But this is just a tip of the iceberg of what we really need to do as a group. I've been trained to think in terms of populations as regions as opposed to just a concentration of people. And if we use the standpoint of if we approach our problem from the standpoint of us being a region within a country, a nation within a nation, we can address a lot of our problems. And another thing I want to say that, and I actually touched on it earlier about radically changing the culture. We need to go from a culture that aims for the bottom to a culture that aims for the top. And we need to do it in a way that's loving to people. We don't want people getting PhDs and then pointing at the guy that doesn't have a PhD and say, why can't you get yourself together? No. We need to develop a culture where you're getting that PhD is not just for you, or that master's degree is not just for you, or your wealth or your business is not just for you. That business belongs to everybody, and you belong to everybody, and everybody belongs to you. And I would like to conclude on that note. We will return next week to discuss medicine and how medicine influences the various issues surrounding medicine and health in our community, and the program will be Kevin Sullivan and myself, and then we'll continue to resume with our series. So I thank you for joining me today, and have a blessed day.